Hey everybody, it's Miss Coconauer, and this is our new project for week 4 of the 6 weeks. We're going to be doing landscapes, and landscapes are pretty much what you see outside, right? But they do have a few variables that we need to get correct when actually drawing one, and one is perspective. So we're going to be looking at foreground, middle ground, and background. Okay, but if you look on Schoology, I have included a few examples. I don't care if you do like a woodsy with mountains and this and that. You can do snowy landscape. You can do a desert landscape. You can do an ocean landscape. Anything that you like. That is totally up to you, okay? So I gave you some examples there and some different ways that you can kind of create trees or mountains and things like that. But remember, also use Google if you have something that you want to draw and maybe I didn't provide it for you and you need a little help. Google some clip art versions of that, and that you'll be able to draw from a little easier, okay? So this one's pretty simple because I am giving you such openness with this project. So what I'm going to be doing is just a simple sectioned off, a couple trees here and there, give you some ideas. Okay, so here we go. We sadly do not have our drawing assistant right now. She's asleep on the couch, but maybe she'll join us later. Okay, so what I did already is some things that you want to consider when drawing a landscape is obviously your composition. How are you going to organize what you're going to draw? You're going to have the foreground, which is something that is closest to you, the middle ground that is middle, and the way in the background. So we have our foreground, our middle ground, and our background. You don't necessarily have to draw the ground for it, but with this, we need to figure out what your horizon line is. Now, if you think of the word horizontal, remember that is side to side, okay? A type of line that is side to side. Horizon line is actually where the ground meets the sky, okay? So we need to figure that out. Now that can be a little tricky when you add mountains and things like that, but we'll get to that in just a second. So the key terms you need to focus on: horizon line, foreground, middle ground, background, okay? So let's go to a new page. And here we go. Okay, so we're gonna be kind of going Bob Ross style here and create different kinds of landscapes. All right, so what I want to do is, let me look at one of our examples that we have up on Schoology for just a second. Okay, in your project, you will need to include, I don't want you just to do, background and foreground. Remember, you need something in the middle of each section. So let's see here. I'm going to click on one of my examples that have mountains, kind of a lake and a tree, okay? So what you start with first is, actually what I'm going to start with first is I'm going to figure out my horizon line, okay? So let's say I'm going to do my horizon line right in the middle, okay? So here is my horizon line. And remember, it's nature, so I don't necessarily need to use a ruler unless you want to and kind of erase it as you go. But you don't need to have it perfectly measured out, okay? So here's my horizon line, but I want to do mountains, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of create rocky mountains and peaks and valleys and that kind of thing. So, and there's some examples. They don't necessarily have to be certain shapes. Obviously different regions of the US, for example, our mountains are a little different than, say, Colorado, because they have more peaks. Okay, so I'm going to do some mountains like this, and then I'm even going to do some mountains behind mountains. Whoa, getting a little crazy there, huh? Okay. Let's see here. Let's add one big mountain kind of over here. And I'm not happy with this little guy. Let's make him continue on to the background there. Okay, and you can kind of edit it as you go. You don't necessarily, you know, have to have it a certain way, because remember, it's of nature, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so there is my mountain range in the background. Now, there's my background. Here is still my horizon line, but now it's kind of muddled because of the mountains. Okay, so this whole section up here is sky. Now, when you're in elementary school, what happens is you color up this here blue and say, oh, there's my sky. But remember, your sky connects all the way down to your horizon line. So all of this section here is going to be your sky. Okay? So, let's go ahead. Let's talking about sky. Let's go ahead and kind of finish off your sky a little bit. What you can do, you don't necessarily, and talking about middle or elementary school, you know, you always did a sun in the corner, and there you go, right? You don't even have to add a sun unless you want to. But remember, you don't have to have it in the corner. You can, or you don't have to. You could make it nighttime, right? And make kind of a moon, one of those crescent like this. You could add a few little stars here and there, right? You could add clouds, right? However you want to do it, okay? And also kind of going back to our other lesson on texture, this is a great way to practice your texture to make it more realistic, right? So you can go in your mountains back there and kind of add in like little sections of shadow. Right? Kind of like the little peaks and valleys. Okay. Now, so anyway, background, sky, all that good stuff. Now let's move on to your middle ground and your foreground. And remember, it's just the distance that it, the background's obviously way in the back, middle ground, and then foreground. So the mountain, like say if we have a tree on the mountain back here, it's going to be so little that you can't even notice it's a tree. But if it's in the middle ground here, it's a little bit bigger, right? But if it's in the foreground, it's really big. So that is the distance that you're creating, okay? So speaking of trees, let's go ahead and just fill those in, like our happy little tree. If you're gonna do a pine tree, you know, you can kind of, especially with those textures, right? You can make one. And remember, when you're doing texture, you're not just scribbling, you're actually, you know, technically you're making every little pine cone or every little leaf, you know. So take your time on this, right? Happy little trees. Happy little trees. We're going to create him a little friend, right? So here's our foreground. What I want is, let's see here. I want to kind of create a lake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this as ground. I'm going to create that lake line. And remember, it doesn't have to be straight. And then I'm going to kind of go off this example here, is rocks are going to be here. A little bit of grass over here. And it's going to swoop up, and there's going to be a tree here. So we'll have a little friend for our tree right here. So let's go ahead and make that big tree. Now with this, it's not going to have as much detail as say this. So with this tree, what you could do even is kind of create those kind of sections and make it break off, right? So you're not just kind of making a far away little triangle tree. And what I would do is kind of go, you're making a branch and kind of then to fill in the pine needles. And you can even kind of overlap too, because it seems like this guy wants to overlap. He's in front of his friend, covering him up. He wants all the attention for himself, right? You can kind of do it in this motion. So you're adding more detail than just doing hash marks there. And you're kind of going outward. Oh, our drawing assistant's back. Hi, Miss Scarlett. Okay. Okay, so I have included some examples of trees and some examples of mountains and things like that that might be in your nature drawings. So you can kind of look at that. Again, if you need, say if you're doing this type of tree and it's not included, you know, Google clip art versions of it or cartoon versions, and that helps. Okay, and so now I'm kind of making it a little heavier at the bottom, right? And I'm kind of speeding through so I don't bore you, but you know, take your time, make it nice and neat. Add that texture that we learned about a couple weeks ago. Go in, kind of fill in those gaps, okay? Okay, so anyway, here's an example. You can even kind of put a little stem at the bottom here. And then you could even kind of add some grass lines here. Okay, could add kind of grass lines kind of to show that the grass is kind of short and it's not compared to kind of like a hayfield or something, you know, it's not tall. Like that, you could add grass lines. On this picture I'm looking at, it kind of has some more rocks, right? And then you kind of shadow the rocks a little bit. And again, I'm speeding through this. You know, take your time, make your rocks look like rocks. Okay. You could even kind of do some cattails. That's usually by lakes, right? These kind of little guys. And you could even do some grass along your pond or lake, whatever you want to do. So here's your rocks. Here's some more tall grass. Kind of frames your water, right? And then you can kind of do the same thing on this. On the picture I'm looking at, it's more of it's a rock that's kind of closer to you. So it's kind of like this. Right, and then kind of have a side of this and then shadowing a little bit. And again, you know, go back, and if you want to kind of sketch it all first and then go back and do your fine details, that works. I'm usually I usually do that and kind of do the whole picture first, get everything where I want it to go, and then go back and work on my little details, okay? So, you know, you're more than welcome to do that. Again, you could add, you know, grass, because remember your foreground section is the one with the most detail, okay? So now remember, this is water. So what I would do with water is kind of add those wavy lines. You could even kind of make a ripple in your water, like a fish just came up or something. Or somebody just threw a little stone. I really sound like Bob Ross right now, don't I? Somebody threw a little stone. It's a little ripple effect. And peaceful. So you can go and do that. You can kind of just do a little like this. Anyway, water. Now, let's focus on our middle ground, is where we need to focus on trees, you could even put like a little house back here or a fence line or something like that. So I'm just gonna focus on some trees. Remember, they don't have to be as detailed as they were before. I'm gonna make this little guy a friend. Okay. But actually I started off making a mistake. See how tall this tree is. You don't want your trees all to be the same size, right? So let's make him just a little taller. Okay. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of skip through and make him something like that. Remember, going through and take your time. But then I could even add any even smaller trees way back here. Okay. And remember, they don't need to be the same height. This one is going to be a little bit bigger because it's a little closer. Right? And you might want to do it this way to kind of get your shape and then fill in your textures, right? It's totally up to you, right? So you're going to go through and make some more trees, overlap, all that good stuff. You are allowed to add in color if you'd like. You don't have to, but you can. Okay. So anyway, I'm speeding through this just so you can kind of have some ideas of the big picture, right? So here's another tree. So we have a cluster of trees here. Maybe you want to make it all the way over. Maybe you may, like I said, maybe you might want to make a house here, like a cabin or something, right? But as you can tell, now I have a landscape that has a foreground, the middle ground, and then the background, okay? So, oh, I'm a little crooked, sorry guys. So when you look at it, you can see the distance that it's created, okay? So again, it doesn't have to be mountains. It can be a beach. It can be snowy. It can be a desert, whatever kind of landscape that you like. So play around with some ideas, figure out where you want to be and where you want to draw. Get that done, and then don't forget your writing assignment. Okay, so your writing assignment, remember, pick out one of the paintings that I have supplied for you, and then go through your critique and answer as many questions as you can to describe that painting, okay? So anyway, I hope you guys like this project, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.